Musicians, you couldn't get more better than this one. We are so privileged and so lucky to have online from America. We have Darryl Jones. Hi, Darryl. How are you, mate?
I'm doing just fine. How are you today?
Fantastic. Now, really, it's such a privilege to be able to chat to you. Can you tell us a little bit? You were born in Chicago, in Illinois. Is that right?
Yeah, I grew up on the south side of Chicago and studied music there before high school and then high school, and went to college at Southern Illinois University, and then again at American Conservatory in Chicago, and then not long after that I moved to New York.
And your dad was a drummer, so how much influence did your dad have as you know, those early days of being a muso?
Well, my dad, first of all, there was always a lot of music being played in the house. Both my dad and my mom were really big music fans. My dad listening to Count Basie and Early Miles and Oscar Peterson and stuff like that. And then my mom really loved James Brown and Sly Stone and Curtis Mayfield and, a lot of that kind of music. And so, yeah, there was always a lot of music around the house. And I find that I got influenced by it even before I became a musician. And my dad taught me how to read music. Just taught me how to basically read rhythm and just how to basically read music is what he taught me. And he was never a professional musician, but he had good training because he'd gone through a high school program at DuSable with a gentleman named Captain Diet, who a lot of the jazz musicians from Chicago came out of that program. So my dad had a good music education, and he passed that along to me.
Now, tell us a little bit about Miles Davis. To score the gig with Miles in the early days of your career, that must have blown you away.
Yeah, it was really incredible, man, because I don't know if you know the story, but his nephew and I were very good friends and played on the music scene in Chicago. And we'd sit in the car after gigs and dream about playing with Miles. Both of us. He's a drummer, a really great drummer. His name's Vince Wilburn Jr. And so a few years after we'd be kind of dreaming about playing with Miles asked him, "Is there anybody in Chicago that you would recommend to play bass with me? I think I'm going to make a change." And so Vince, called me, and I spoke with Miles that day, and I went and auditioned with him the next day, and he hired me. And funny enough, the training that I had from growing up in my household, like I said, my dad was listening to early Miles records, and my mom was listening to funky stuff like James Brown and Graham Central Station and stuff like that. And then the guy who taught me, those guys were listening to the Electric Miles stuff. So I learned to jam, and I learned a little bit about jazz, and I learned a little bit about funk music. So it was interesting because I really thought after I got the gig that it was really, in a way, my training for it was really perfect, because I had a little bit of a grasp of jazz music. I had some of the grasp of playing songs. I had the grasp of playing with a vocalist, which very much, in my opinion, playing with Miles is like playing with a voice, And so I had all of these different pieces that kind of came together and worked well for that gig.
We're talking to Darryl Jones, who is the session player, who's done, among many, many things, played with the Rolling Stones and Madonna and Cher and all that. Now, I'm a big Rolling Stones fan. Tell us, was it back in '93 when Bill Wyman first left the Stones did you get straight involved then? Were you the first cab off the rank, so to speak?
No, actually, my understanding is I heard a rumor. A friend of mine called me and told me that he'd heard a rumor, and that would have been in late '90. That would have been sometime in '92 that Bill was leaving the band, and so he got me Mick's management's number. I had met Mick a few years earlier working with Sting when we did the film Bring On the Night.
Yeah.
I met him backstage at the Mogador Theater in Paris a number of at that point. But anyway, I called his management and told him that I'd heard that Bill was leaving and that I was bass player and that I'd like to. There was some list that they were compiling like to get on the list. I'd love to come and play for the guys if they were going to be hearing guys. And they said, well, nothing's going to happen for a while, but we'll make note that you called. And I guess it was about a year later, I got a call that they wanted me to come out and play.
Now, was that? Did you go into the studio and play, or were you rehearsing up for a tour at that stage?
Actually, it was a rehearsal studio in New York, SIR, famous. It's actually not there anymore, but famous rehearsal studio, SIR, on 52nd and 8th. And actually, it was actually the same room that I first rehearsed with Miles the day after I auditioned with him. Now that I think back on it, it was actually the same room, or it's the same studio, I'm sure. In any case, I went in and I played through a bunch of the hits with them. That would have been like May of '93.
Yep.
And then in October of '93, I flew to Ireland, and we all stayed at Ronnie's house. So I stayed in a hotel nearby, and I auditioned for the songs that they had written for Voodoo Lounge, which was the first record that I recorded on, and began performing with them. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it must have been just such a kick did you get out and tour pretty much straight away, or with them, or?
Yeah, it would have been, so let me see, I recorded November of '93. They started doing additional recording in January in LA. I think we were on tour by September or late August in '94. So yeah, it was not long after.
Right.
8 months after.
And I mean, you always get the idea of the Rolling Stones as a bit of the party band type thing, but really, looking at Mick Jagger, you'd be thinking this guy he must be a fitness fanatic. What was the regime of the band while you were out on the road? Is it the party lifestyle that we all look at, or is it, as I said, is it a bit more disciplined?
Well, I mean, I think by the time I came, things were not as crazy as maybe they had been. Obviously, the times weren't as crazy. The 60s, the 70s, the 80s was a pretty wild time. By this time, everybody's got families. Everybody's families on the road, so things we were having a lot of fun. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But everybody was really, really focused on the music. Everybody was really, of course, in my opinion, coming from, not really being totally a jazz guy and then also not really being a rock guy, kind of being somewhere in between. The idea of rock and roll is to have some fun.
Yeah.
And you better be having some fun because that's part of the irreverence of the music. But at the same time, I think by that time, all of those guys had been working on their own projects. They had their own bands that they'd worked on. And so everybody kind of gotten a little bit more serious about music, And, or I shouldn't say a little bit more serious about music, but just very serious about music because I don't know what was happening before I was around. But no, it was we did both, man. We played a lot of great music back then, and we had a lot of fun.
Now you played with Eric Clapton as well. That must be, as a musician, that must be quite a thrill in itself. How extensive was your?
Great.
Yeah.
I actually only played with Eric on a record. I did one record date with him, and actually, as a matter of fact, just for information, George Harrison was on that session, so I actually got to play with both of them on the same date, and it was just maybe 2 or 3 days of recording on the Journeyman record. But it was really great fun. He's a great guy, a great musician.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the Three Brave Souls? Is this your own personal project? Is it very close to your heart?
Well, it's not just my project. Actually, it's a co-leader situation with John and I and Ndugu Chancellor. John was offered a record deal to do like a kind of funky jazz record, and he called me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing it with him. And I said, well, of course, man. We've been playing with the Miles Alumni Band together, and I really love his work and his playing, and know him as a person. And so it was easy to jump on board. And then he mentioned Ndugu, who I'd also been playing with a little bit, and so we got together and we all brought songs, and we put the record together and had a lot of fun doing it. It's it's a funky, jazz record. It nods at a number of our contemporaries. The Crusaders. A number of soul jazz records.
And it's fantastic. We've been playing a few tracks from it this morning, which has been awesome to have a listen to. People like Madonna and that. How was your involvement with that? Did you tour with Madonna? Or were you doing the six?
I did the Blind Ambition tour.
Yep.
And it was great fun, man. There were some great musicians on that tour. David Williams, guitar player, who died a few years ago. It was an incredible guitar player. Jonathan Moffett, Kevin Kendricks was playing keyboard. It was really a great band. And Luis Conte played percussion. He was like one of my favorites. So it was an incredible band. And watching Madonna put that show together was really a learning experience. She's a really gifted, she's pretty visionary in her in developing concepts for shows. It was really incredible to see her take those ideas and put them to work, and just to see how hard she works at it. She's not a joke, man. She's a very serious artist.
Now, where would you find your most difficulty, as in musicianship, with having played with so many greats? Is there one artist in particular that's really challenged your abilities?
Well, I'm always challenged by any music that I play, because I think if you kind of approach music and you feel like, oh, this is easier than that, then you'll kind of miss the essence of the music, the thing that makes it really, really special. I don't really believe in the idea that, there are a lot of musicians say, well, if you can play that kind of music, then you can play this other kind of music over there. I think that that's disrespecting the music that you're attempting to play. And so I always try to come to whatever I'm playing with fresh eyes and openness, and I try to just find the thing that makes the song work. I mean, I'm always really trying to find the bass line, the sound, the feel